Hello everybody. My name is Vladyslav. I'm a software developer. Despite I mostly work on ASP.NET projects, I enjoy developing cross-platform applications. And today we will talk about .NET Maui. So, what is .NET Maui? Maui is not only a Hawaii island or Disney hero, but it's also a .NET multi-platform API, a framework for building native device applications for mobile, tablet, and desktop. Before moving our main part about .NET Maui, let's first ask, why do we need it at all? There are so many cross-platform frameworks, native development. Why should I choose .NET Maui? Let's compare .NET Maui with native development. First of all, let's talk about tech stack. So with .NET Maui, we have a one tech stack. We have a single code base, which we share across all our platforms. While with native tech stack, we need to write our own application for each platform using its own technology, like Swift for iOS, Kotlin Java for Android, and etc. If we're talking about code sharing, with .NET Maui, we have up to 96% of code sharing because it's a true cross-platform framework. While with native, we need to create each application, and we cannot share our code between different platforms. So if we are talking about code sharing, we can release much faster. We save a lot of time and money while developing application. And of course, we release much faster. If we are talking about UI and UX with .NET Maui, we absolutely can customize all our UI for each platform. We never bumped into some problems, into some issues with customization because we can full access to the native code. And with native approach, because it's native, we completely have a platform-specific UI. According to performance, .NET Maui may be a bit slower than the native, because we also need to work with .NET inside of it, but the performance is still good. We will talk about it a bit later. And of course, about hardware capabilities with .NET Maui, in native, we also have an access to platform-specific APIs in both cases, and we also have all hardware capabilities in both cases. As for my recommendation, if you develop application for which requires code, so just go with native approach and develop for each platform specifically. If you create some applications, more generic application, and probably you do not need like super performance, .NET Maui will be the best framework for you. Also, in case if you want to release very fast, you want to have a limited budget for application, so .NET Maui is great for this. Okay, so with .NET Maui, you have two approaches how you can develop applications at all with .NET. Approaches. First is .NET Maui, where you have a shared backend code. It's where all your services, for example, lives. And also you have a shared user interface. So you write your code using XAML, or you write your code using C#. With .NET 4, it can be a .NET for Android, .NET for iOS, .NET for watchOS, any other platform. You also have a shared backend code where you have your shared like services, whatever you want to share between all platforms. But as for user interface, you need to create it specific for each platform. For example, for Android, you need to use its layouts. For iOS interface, you need to use like storyboards, UI controllers, or any other. For other platforms, you need to use its own user interface. So how .NET Maui actually works? So we have a shared app code, which is our top level. Usually it interacts with and communicates with .NET Maui framework. but also you have an access to the native code for Android, like native API for each platform, which .NET for Android, iOS, for macOS, for Windows, also for Tizen. That's the list of all platforms .NET Maui currently support. And also then .NET Maui have direct access to all that level and communicate with them. Then we have a shared base class library where .NET shared like common .NET code lives, which then communicate with mono runtime for these three platforms. And for Windows, we have Win32. And then we have a native Android platforms on that level. So as I already mentioned, .NET Maui works with Android, iOS, macOS using Mac Catalyst, Windows starting from Windows 8 or Windows 10, and also supported by Tizen, by Samsung. It also supports Tizen. And as for Linux, which mostly all people ask the .NET Maui team, Linux is should be supported by community, and it's currently in preview in a separate project, but maybe it will be added soon. We'll see. So what features you can get out of the box? .NET Maui support provide a lot of features, and so you can customize and it will suit for any application. So with animations, you can animate your application using any and create any animation you would like to add, like with some moving, some scaling, some fade animations, rotation, whatever you want. Also, it has a lot of different kind of pages, which you allow you to store your content, where you actually display it, like content page, flyout page, where you allow to see like a master page and the main page, tab page, where you already have a tab provided for you out of the box. Also, it has a lot of layouts, so like a grid, vertical stack layout, flex layout. You will never bump into. You can always lay out any control you want, so or create your own. As for controls, there are more than 50 controls out of the box, and this list can be always extended by you, or there are a lot of third-party developers which allow you to and provide you a lot of list of available controls. As for effects, you can also add some effects to make your application looks much better, like add some additional shadow for any control. As for behaviors, they also allow you to customize your application for your needs, like email validation. When you type some text, you can add some behavior, and it will work for you and show you some result. Of course, some converters which allow you to convert from one value to another and customize your application and convert some value, and also much more. So if that is not enough for you, all the features which comes out of the box, there are a lot of third-party developers and teams which provide you another list of controls which you can use in your application. Like Tallermush team provide a lot of great controls which you can add and use. The same comes from Syncfusion controls. It also provides some great controls, which some of them are not available in .NET Maui, some of them duplicates, but also with some customization uh, and provide its own style for all applications. So if you choose like Syncfusion, for example, you will get the same style for all your controls in your application. And one of my favorite packages, which available for .NET Maui. Not only I like it not only because I'm a core developer, one of the core team members of this product, but also because this package provides you a lot of great controls, which, as for me, it's essential package for .NET Maui, and I even cannot imagine application without it. It provides you a ton of converters, different extensions, views, behaviors, animations. So it's open source. It's awesome package. So if you haven't installed it yet, I highly recommend you to use it. So let's now take a look at our application. So what is .NET Maui and how it works? Okay, sorry. Oh, oops. Give me a second. So let's first create some .NET Maui application. So what do we? How can we create .NET Maui application right now? So .NET Maui is successor of Xamarin Forms, and it provides a lot of benefits over current Xamarin Forms. So with .NET Maui, which released with .NET 6, it's now a part of .NET family. So you can create a .NET Maui application using the CLI. Let's see how we can do it. Folder. And now with .NET CLI, you can write .NET new. Let's see what we can create with .NET Maui. So with .NET Maui, we can create like a simple application, .NET Maui Blazor. So you can create class library, some different other pages. Also, you can create now with .NET new command, you can create native Android application, native iOS mobile application, Mac Catalyst, and you can install much more templates, and it's how you can create .NET Maui. So let's create it, .NET new Maui. And let's see what how it's changed. Okay, options. Yeah. So what comes in default .NET Maui application? First of all, it's now uses .NET SDK style, where and it much easier to customize it, to read it. And what's different from Xamarin Forms? It's now a single project. You can see that it now has a target frameworks for Android, iOS, Mac Catalyst, Windows, Tizen, and it's a single project. You can also specify that it's a Maui application. You specify in one single place your title, your application ID, the version, and as for developer purpose, it's now much easier to develop application and release it for different platforms. Also, you specify some supported platforms. So .NET Maui comes with support of iOS starting from version 10, macOS starting from version 14, Android starting Android 5 and higher, and Windows for Windows 10 and higher. Also, another benefit of .NET Maui over Xamarin Forms, you have it integrated with image resizer package. So you now do not need to create image and icon for different image sizes of your platform. For different platform, you only need to create one, for example, Maui icon, Maui splash screen, Maui image, and it will automatically resize it for different sizes of your application target screen. The same comes for Maui font and Maui assets, so you have it in one place. And how it understands that for each platform, how you can customize it. you have a platforms folder where you have an Android, iOS, all other platforms which you need to support. And this is where all your start points live. So for main activity, for Maui application, it now lives in a specific platform folder. Also, let's go further. As for resources, it's now the single folder where you store all your resources. Like app icon, it's now an, for example, just SVG image, which you can, which will automatically regenerate it, create your PNG file, and it will automatically resize it. The same for fonts, images, splash screen, and styles. The .NET Maui template already comes with a predefined styles. So when you start your application, you do not need to care about the styling, each specific target type. For each control, it already comes with predefined styles, which most likely will suit for your application. Then a new Maui program class, and it's a start point of Maui application, where if you're familiar with ASP.NET startup, it follows the same style where you have a Maui builder, and now you customize, you register dependencies, register all fonts, and this is how you customize entry point of your Maui application. Then other things remain pretty much the same compared to Xamarin Forms. You still have that app.xaml file, which is pretty much the same which you already had in Xamarin Forms. As I mentioned, there are two ways how you can create and develop your Maui application. One way is using XAML, where you write and describe your code using XML, and describe layouts of your controls, how you layout them, and in code behind, you can create like some events or whatever you want, some backend side. So it is, if you are WPF developer or Windows developer, you will most likely switch to this one and can start developing not only for Windows, but starting develop for all other platforms. Okay, that's it as for structure. Let's now back to our presentation, and let's talk what actually make .NET Maui better and why they decided to switch from Xamarin to .NET Maui. Okay, so because .NET Maui is evolution of Xamarin Forms, they they had a base idea that they have a back compatibility, but also under the hood, they absolutely different. So in terms of Xamarin Forms, there were a renders architecture where renders depends on Xamarin Forms controls. And with .NET Maui, they introduced a new level of abstraction of control interfaces. So what we have right now, for each control, we have an interface. For example, entry control, which is the same like a text where you usually type some text. It's an entry control. So for that, we have an interface. And then for this interface, we have a handlers. So handler is like a mapper between your interface and between your native platform control. For example, it's a text edit or UI text field on different platforms. So you map all your properties, all your methods in handlers. And what happens next? Then we have a implementation of that interface. And when we register that handler, we map that control to our handler. So there is no like dependency between control and that interface. So you can now create a different implementation for that control, because it's an interface and you can customize it. For example, it allows now to create another implementation of Maui controls using the command. So let's take a look at .NET Maui Handler to make it probably a bit more clear. Let's switch to our code. And let's take a look at our application. I will show you, for example, drawing view control, which is existing in .NET Maui Community Toolkit. So what we have there? We have an interface. For example, iDrawing view. It inherits iView. It's a base interface for all .NET Maui controls, and it has some properties, and we want to create our own implementation of drawing view. So what happens next? Then we go to handlers, and we say that how it works. So we wait a second, yeah, this one. So what we say, we have a view handler, and we map our iDrawing view interface to Maui drawing view. Where is the Maui drawing view is a native control which is created for each platform. Let's see it here in drawing view. We have a platform view. So how it works? So you can see Maui drawing view is absolutely native for a specific platform. It now uses some native, for example, in this case for iOS, some methods to override. For Android, it's the same. So it's native implementation of our control. Assume it's a native Android and native iOS control. What happens next? Then we say that we want to map all our properties which we have in iDrawing view. So then they can map and called automatically by our code. So we say that we want to map our, for example, is multi-line mode enabled property to the same property in native implementation of Maui drawing view. We created this method and we mapped it in our drawing mapper. And the same we can done for all our other properties. The same can done for methods and in command mapper. Then when it's mapped, so now we created the one side of our bridge. So we mapped our interface to native control. The next step is to map our implementation, which is drawing view control, which already implements our interface, and we want to register our second part. So we say that we want to add handler, which will map this control to the native implementation. And that is done in here specific method for configure Maui handlers, where we add additional handler. What is the benefit of handler architecture? First of all, it's performance. In .NET Maui, in Xamarin Forms, when we had the render architecture, on startup, we had a reflection which on startup took our performance because we need to find all our renders which we had in application. And because it happened in startup, the startup performance was not very well, and it took up to 1 second or even more to find all renders and start your application. With .NET Maui, that issue is resolved because you already specify what handler should be used and how it can be registered. So there is no that search of through all application to find all renders. Okay, let's go like this here. So when we talk about performance, performance is a very important part of each application. Okay, let's give it a second to. Hope it works. Yeah. So compared to what we have in performance with .NET Maui, as for absolutely native applications, you can see it will always win because it doesn't need to store .NET code inside of it. So it's a native application. It will always win. As for Xamarin Android, compared to what we have in .NET Android, which is .NET 6, you can see up to 50% performance improves compared what we had before. As for Xamarin Forms, it's a bit lower, but also anyway, we have a performance improvement. And it's only for .NET 7, but with .NET for .NET 6. As for .NET 7, performance will be improved even more. And as you can see for Shell, which is a specific layout, I would say, or even a style of your application, where it has a lot of benefits like specific navigation, specific layouts. It has almost 30% performance improvement. And the real application, which is created by .NET Maui team, is a .NET Podcast app. You can see it takes almost 1 second, but it's a full application with a lot of pages, a lot of UI. And also compared to size, because we need to store a .NET Maui, of course, Xamarin Forms and .NET Maui application will be higher than the native, but it's not so critical. But yeah, as you can see for .NET Podcast big app, it may take a lot of space, but you also need to know that it's up to you how you optimize it, how you run your application, which platform, which target framework. So it always depends. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, but as for performance, you can always improve it because you cannot always customize .NET Maui code or .NET native code. You can improve your own application just by rewriting your UI. For example, this code and this one provide you the same result just because you and this code benefits the performance just because it has a smaller level of includes in so the main problem of all applications that the measure of each control measure its size and how it layout it. So the smaller part of your application's your code, the application will run faster. Well, if .NET Maui is not enough for you, you can also create a .NET Maui Blazor application. So what is Blazor? If you don't know, it's a .NET framework for creating web applications without using JavaScript. So you can create your code using HTML, and it includes Blazor. So .NET Maui team decided that if it's not enough for you to using only XAML or using only C#, you can now develop your application using HTML. So it's great because now all developers, web developers, can now migrate their application to a specific platform, and it will just work. So let's see how it works. For example, let's switch to Maui samples lib, and let's start, for example, this application. .NET. It's here. So as you can see, also you can build and run your application directly from CLI, which was not possible easy way in Xamarin Forms world. And now with .NET Maui, you can you do not need to depend on like Visual Studio or something else. And you can see now that application, it's a web page which is inside of native macOS application, and you can wait while it's loading. Well, let's see what is different from like vanilla.NET Maui application. Let's see. So it's a combination of Blazor application and .NET Maui. So style is of CS approach file is the same, and as you can see here, this package doesn't know anything about .NET Maui, but you can still use it, despite it's specific for Blazor. So initialization is pretty much the same. You can also need to register Blazor web view. And in your main page, there is a specific control called Blazor web view, where you initialize your host page and register your root component where your application will start it. Then you just have a Blazor code with HTML pages, which you can already use. And as you can see, it's started as just an application. Okay, let's go next. What we have. Okay. So another option for developing .NET Maui controls is useful for those who want to control each pixel on their screen. So .NET Maui allows you to draw your control using graphics view. And for example, this library, Aloha Kit, was developed by Xavier, who is a developer, one of the developers of .NET Maui. And you can see that each control here is just created using the drawing. Let's take a look at how it's implemented as well. So .NET Maui now allows you to create at least 3 different ways how you can create your application using XAML and just native controls, which available on each platform using Blazor. So you can develop HTML page with your specific button and bind it to any backend code inside .NET Maui application. And also the third way how you can create it is using a drawable control. That happens because .NET Maui has a graphics package. So now each control can be drawn. With the graphics view, you inherit from it, you have a drawable property where you specify how your application is drawn. And yeah, on a single draw method, you specify how you draw your control on a canvas. For example, here, draw strokes, drawing some rectangles, so whatever you need on drawing your application. And for the same control, like I already displayed to you, like drawing view was developed using this approach. So its native implementation is developed using graphics view, which provided by .NET Maui. Okay. So if you still not migrated to .NET Maui, it's a good time to do it starting with .NET 7. The first release of .NET Maui didn't have all features that are available in Xamarin. So with .NET 7 release, it brings like maps, it brings a lot of desktop features like context menu. And as for migration, it's pretty much easy. So for behaviors and converters, it's only namespace. For Xamarin Essentials, it's now integrated in .NET Maui, and it's part of it. So you don't need depends on the separate package to go out of the box. As for Xamarin Community Toolkit, it's now a community toolkit for Maui. So please use it. As for effects, you can find it's in compatibility layer. So platforms, so effects is some kind of obsolete. So it's better to use behaviors. And next one, as for renders, you can still use it, but please pay attention that you will not get all benefit of performance when using it, because it will still need to you still need to use a compatibility render. I will not focus on how you can develop, how you can migrate. You can find it by these links. And yeah, let's see what applications you can develop and how you can develop it. For example, let's start from this application. Let's start Maui Bank, for example. And how you can develop it. You usually create a XAML code, you add your package, you can customize it using specific styles for each platform. You write your code. For example, like collection view control, which allows you to display items in list. Okay, while application started, let's probably switch to another monitor. My application is already started. Okay, so this is my implementation of Kanban board. The control, so where you can scroll between different columns, you can delete some column and cards. You can try to swipe between columns and drag and drop implementation of it. And another application, for example, with .NET Maui, you can create some graphics application like a paint. For example, let's open it. You can create some kind of these applications. You can draw something. You can change the background color. You can rotate your UI. and do whatever you want with your application. And of course, it will be the same UI on different platforms. Let me show how it works. For example, it's the same Maui Paint application. Let's start it here. For example, on Mac Catalyst, on macOS. Okay, let's wait while it's building. And as you can see, it looks pretty much the same. It's the same UI, and it's only one shared code without any specific implementation. Let's open the same image here. And here it is. You can also rotate, so you do not need to create a different code for specific platform. But anyway, you can do it in case you need. For example, let's take a look at this specific example for Maui Paint. So if you need to implement it, you can always do it in a platforms and implement specific, in this case, dialog service for specific platform. You can always have access to code which is depends and exists in a specific platform. For example, this dialog view, it's different for all platforms. Okay, let's now see another application, which is Canva, which is a copy of Monobank application. For example, you can type a pin, some pin, you can switch to it, some navigations, some scrolling. You can scroll, you can see how it displayed. You can have some animations, beautiful animations in your application, switch between different tabs, and that's all with. So you develop it. So this application was developed in less than 1 day, and
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt. We have comments in the chat like this. The sharing screen is frozen, so nothing is changing right now. I'm not sure that it should, but
okay, let me reshare the screen. Can you see it right now?
yeah.
Okay, let's back. So as you can see, this application looks similar to existing Monobank application if you actually use it. And yeah, also if we restart it, let's restart it. For example, in case we want to add some specific implementation, for example, for login, we want to sign in by Face ID. Let's enroll our application. So now you can see it asks for Face ID, so we still have an access to API which is specific for only, for example, for a specific platform, in this case for iOS, and our application works without any limitations. And also with .NET Maui, it supports now multi-window, so which was not available in previous in Xamarin Forms. Let's also see how it works and what benefit it gives for us. Let's wait while it's building. So with .NET Maui, you can now access to multiple windows. You can create multiple windows. So for those who develop desktop applications, it's a great improvement because with Xamarin, you can only get a one window. You can always close all windows, so you can subscribe to any events. You can customize the size of the window. So .NET Maui is now a true cross-platform application, and also it gives a lot of benefits for desktop developers. Another example, for example, is animations. You can create a lot of different animations for your application, and you can never bump into some issues or problems. And let's see what you can create. So this is example of how you can create animations. So your .NET Maui application now looks much better. Okay. For example, in case you want to develop some application which works with, for example, some image effects you want to add to your application, let's now provide the sample on phone. Well, it's the same as on desktop, because with .NET Maui we have a same application on all platforms. Let's wait while it's starting. While that, let's see. Okay, while it's building, let's start also another application. Let's terminal, come on. For example, in case you want to develop some application which dynamically changes in runtime, which is not possible with Apple, because it has a limitation of policies when you develop, so you cannot like change your code. After that, you can use application which just built another application. For example, with this sample, it's a Maui Blazor application, and for example, some kind of calculator, let's say, which run in. So you develop a code which build the code and run this function. You can run it. You can see the result of this operation, which runs in a pop-up. Okay. As for another sample, we add some blur. For our image, you can see you can customize your application, and it will suit for mostly for all general applications which you develop with absolutely beautiful UI. So some saturation, so you can develop it, and you develop it really fast. And probably that's let's run the final sample, which is available starting from .NET 7, which I mentioned is Maui Maps application. Let's also start it on our platform, and let's see what it does. So in this specific sample, I added a custom pin, which is really useful for those who don't like a standard pin and want to customize it using. So in case it's not available, you can always customize your application. Let's see in this specific sample for Maui apps how I did it. So first of all, I created a custom control, which is custom pin, and created a specific handler for this custom control. As for, let's start from iOS application. I inherited from existing handler because it's already exists. I only needed to change the platform element, and do not need to add any additional marks, so I do not need to use and create a whole new handler. So created a new custom annotation that will store our image, and then I just use it in my code where I load this image and just add it to native map. So now you can always access to platform view and access to the virtual view based from handler. And in case you do not need to create a handler, you can always customize your application using behaviors or so you can choose in what is the simplest way for you to customize your application. If you need to use handler, or you can you create just a behavior or effect, or just customize it directly from initialization step. And let's see what we get. Let's start. So you can see that now we have 2 pins created on our map. You can still click on it and see some result. So I think that's all what I wanted to show you today, and I think we can go to questions. Okay. This Maui is allowed to create a new project only for single platform. No, you can create, when you create a .NET Maui code, you can create a new project for all platforms. Let me show you again. So you specify in your, let's switch to Maui app sample. When you create your new application, you create a code. When you create a Maui application, you already have a template which allows you to create for different platforms. When we create a .NET new, where it is .NET new iOS application, it will also create a template only for this platform. But as for Maui, Maui Blazor, Maui library, you will create an application for different platforms in one. So it's one project which target different target frameworks. Okay, let's go to the next question. Are app sizes represent App Store download size or on device size after installation is taken into account? App sizes, so how I measured it, I just created an application and see the size of APK file or IPA file. So I think it always depends on a target. So on each platform, it will depends. For example, when you deploy your application to Google Play Market, you deploy a B file, and then it automatically converted so on to APK for specific platform target device. So it may be different on x86 application or on x86 platform or 64-bit platform. So I measured it only size of application, not on when I installed it and see the size of it. What is the difference between Maui and Maui Blazor in performance? So when you, so Blazor itself, it's, so assume Maui Blazor is a web view control. So in terms of rendering, in terms of displaying it, it will be probably faster just because you need to display only one control, and you do not need to calculate the size of it, and it runs probably in terms of layout faster. But but please pay attention that you also start Blazor up inside of it, and it usually takes some time just to load Blazor itself. As for startup and displaying the final result, Maui faster, because when you start it, you already have a rendered application. When you start Maui Blazor, you may see like a white screen with the loading, but yeah, it depends on. So you can always customize it, but as for me, I would probably go with Maui. But when we bumped into some very specific control, for example, like in this sample, where you want to some drag and drops, we want to some specific customization. In this case, Maui Blazor suits better because you already have like rendering HTML code. Probably it's faster, but it depends on your skills. Well, I didn't try it debugging Maui application on from Windows, but debugging application from Mac, debugging iPhone application, it works on my device. So I didn't try running it directly from Windows. On simulator, I think it works just because it's simulator. I didn't try it. Okay. Okay. Connection extremely. Well, as for yeah, Xamarin Forms and its initial release was not super great, and even I bumped into a lot of issues from an initial version. But starting from version, let's say 4, it's become much better, and I think it was suitable for even big applications. As for Maui, I think starting from .NET 7, you will see a better application than it was in initial release. And it will be a full application with migration almost of all features which were available in Xamarin, with a lot of bug fixes of initial release. So please wait for the .NET 7 release, and I think it will work much better. And I can say that I had one customer which decided to use Xamarin Forms as a framework for developing the application. It was an enterprise app, and it was so customer was satisfied. And with .NET Maui, you have 2 years to migrate from Xamarin. So Xamarin Forms version 5 is the final version, and .NET Maui is a future of Xamarin Forms. And you have 2 years of migration, and I think with each new version, it becomes better and better. So I suggest you migrate starting from .NET 7. And FB, I suppose it's Facebook. You can find samples of similar application developed with for .NET Maui, like a copy of real Facebook app and audio in, and it works. As for audio in video, please wait. .NET Community Toolkit Maui will give you a new media element control very soon. With audio and video, you will use it very soon. Do you need to have a device running on each time in order to compile the solution? No, you do not need to have a device. If you mean a phone or iPhone or Android phone, you do not need it. you can always use emulator, simulator, and just develop it with and like here in example. I do not have iPhone 14, but I can still develop and see how it will look like on the real platform. Well, .NET Maui was it's same for in terms of user because it's developed using the back compatibility for easy migration, and it's always up to you what platform you want to use, like React or Flutter. But if you're a .NET developer, .NET Maui is the best for you. If you migrating from Windows, like if you're Windows developer, also .NET Maui will be better for you. If you have some great experience, and for example, if you have React application and you React expert, you can always use React Native, Flutter, whatever you want to develop your app. But .NET Maui, as for me, have a great performance improvement, and it has a lot of bug fixes which were not possible to fix in Xamarin Forms because of some limitations, back compatibility, etc. So as for .NET Maui, because it became a part of .NET team, I think it will be a future of family and even more integration with .NET. I think, yeah, it can be, it definitely can be a competitor for Flutter and React Native, but as usual, it definitely needs some time to migrate, to more users migrate from Xamarin to .NET Maui, and by that time, .NET Maui currently hard working on migrating all existing all features which exist in Xamarin and still not available in .NET Maui. Also, with .NET Maui, you always get an access to the and support for latest version of platforms, like iOS 16 is already available in .NET Maui, and you can develop your application targeting the latest version of your framework. Yeah, Maui sample solution is available. It's available on my GitHub. I also mentioned it in presentations. So as for the last slide which I have, so for links and samples, of course, start from docs. It's probably the best solution to know more about .NET Maui. And as for first project with .NET Maui, I also have a website where I usually publish all my articles. You can find it using this address. I try to publish article probably once per month. So if you can subscribe and see the latest news from me and get it. And also .NET Maui Community Toolkit GitHub, where you can follow and use this Community Toolkit package, which I mentioned, which is great. It has like a lot of controls, so mostly all like controls which, for example, in this application, like all animations available, all drawing is developed using Community Toolkit Maui application. And it also has some alerts like toast, snack bar, like dialog service, and dialog will probably come later. Like this drawing view control is also a part of Community Toolkit, and so I highly recommend you use it in your application, and you will enjoy using it. Also, my sample of Maui samples GitHub repository available on GitHub, and my two good friends like Gerald and James Montemagno, they have a YouTube channels which I highly recommend you subscribe and follow them. They also publish new videos very often, and you will learn a lot of new from them. And yeah, let's see if we have some more questions. I think that's it.